How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to read some David Hume. I'm going to share my screen. Now, we are reading from Hume, A Guide for the Perplexed by Angela M. Coventry. And I've been looking around for different secondary literature to explain Hume, because Hume is very technical, subtly technical. And I'm actually very impressed by how Angela Coventry explicates Hume. So we're going to read some of this. And we've read Paul Russell, we've read Dan O'Brien and Alan Bailey. We're going to read some of the Stanford Encyclopedia as well on David Hume. But we're going to read a little bit about this today. One of Hume's major aims in both the treatise and the inquiry is to explain fully the relation of cause and effect. And he regards the resulting theory as one of his most important and original contributions to philosophy. His argument to do with reasoning concerning cause and effect, or what has come to be known as his argument about induction, is one of the most famous arguments in the history of philosophy. There remains still today considerable disagreement about what Hume's argument to do with the causal inference amounts to, and there are loads of responses to the argument. After outlining the account of the causal inference in the final section, I consider perhaps the most famous response given to Hume's argument about the causal relation offered by the great philosopher Immanuel Kant. It is, of course, not at all possible to do justice to Kant's very complex theory of causation and the transcendental framework within which it is embedded here, but the importance of Kant's response to Hume warrants a brief assessment about the theory here. The monumental question of whether Kant successfully answered Hume on causality will not be settled by any means. The intention is to merely offer two possible rejoinders to Kant's theory on behalf of Hume. The relation of cause and effect. As we observed in chapter 4.41, Hume thought that when we imaginatively exercise our understanding, our minds are guided by 7 philosophical or reasoning relations, which are divided as follows: resemblance, identity, space and time, quantity or number, quality or degree, contrariety, and causes or effects. Hume divides the 7 philosophical relations into 2 classes in the treatise. The first class, including resemblance, contrariety, degree or quality, and quantity or number, depend upon the consideration of related ideas alone and comprise objects of knowledge and certainty. The second class, which includes identity, relations of time and space, and causation, depends on the input of further experiences, and these are objects of probability. Philosophical relations are produced by comparison of those relations either constant or inconstant, which 2 or more objects bear to each other. Constant relations include resemblance, contrariety, degrees in quality, and proportion in quantity or number. They are called constant because these relations depend entirely on the ideas and change only with the change of its ideas. So far, as long as we do not change our ideas of a triangle will always have its 3 angles, equal to 2 right angles. This is an example of proportion in quantity or number. Whether 2 ideas resemble each other is a function entirely of the ideas themselves. If they are contrary to one another, this can be seen by inspection. We can see from inspection of the ideas of square and circle that no object could be both. Comparisons of the degrees of quality can also be made on the basis of the ideas themselves. Whether one shade of red is deeper than another is apparent by inspection of the 2 colors. In each of these cases, the comparison of such ideas is made directly, with both ideas fully in view of the mind. Such knowledge is intuitive. We recognize these relations at first sight without the need for any inquiry or reasoning. We can also, to some extent, directly compare proportion of quantity, number. That 3 is greater than 2 is apparent by comparing the 2 ideas. The relation of proportion in quantity or number is demonstrative, or an example of demonstration. We may have to make a number of comparisons in a chain of ideas. We can be certain regarding each link of the chain, and so can be certain of the whole. In demonstration, it is impossible to conceive of the opposite without implying a contradiction. It is impossible for the addition of 2 and 2 to be anything but 4, and to deny it involves contradiction. In the inconstant relations include identity, relations of time and place, and causation. These are inconstant because they do not depend entirely on the ideas and may be changed with no change in the ideas involved. For example, 2 objects of the ideas of those objects may be left unchanged, yet we can vary or change the distance between those objects. This is an example of the relation of time and place. Of the 7 philosophical relations, 3 of these relations are also natural relations. Natural relations include the 3 principles of the association of ideas: resemblance, contiguity, and cause and effect. Note that causation may be either a natural or philosophical relation. Association, or the ability of the imagination to unite ideas according to certain principles by a gentle force, produce these natural relations. Both resemblance and contiguity in time and place involve 2 ideas derived from impressions which are both present to the mind. Cause and effect, specifically, are relations of which we receive information from experience, and it is the connection of cause and effect which carries us beyond the evidence of our memory and senses. If a person finds a watch on a deserted island, they would conclude automatically that they had once been other humans on the island. If one hears a rational and articulate discourse in complete darkness, they would conclude that other people were present in the room, and so on. In section 4 of the inquiry, the topic of relations is dropped in favor of a division of the objects of human reason, commonly called Hume's fork: relations of ideas and matters of fact. Relations of ideas have the following features: include everything which is intuitively or demonstrably certain, deny them involves a contradiction, discoverable by thought alone without evidence of anything existent, include pure mathematics, geometry, algebra, and arithmetic. An example of 3 multiplied by 5 equals 15. Here we see a logical relation between these ideas that we can be certain of, and in fact cannot conceive of as being false. That these relations of ideas are either intuitively or demonstrably certain means that we grasp the certainty of them either immediately, this would be intuition, including resemblance, contrariness, degrees, and quality, or through a process of reasoning where it is impossible to conceive the contrary, which is demonstration and includes proportion and quantity and number. Type of relation this type of relation may be comprehended without any dependence on anything existing in the universe, because we understand the truth by just understanding what it says. In many cases, then, the mind is able to gain knowledge merely by examining ideas which it has before its view, as in mathematics. The truth about these relations does not guarantee that statements like 3 multiplied by 5 equals 15 will always be true. The relation between the ideas will stay exactly the same unless there is a change in the ideas. Matters of fact depend on what experience tells us and have the following features: not intuitively certain, denial involves no contradiction, involve existence or non-existence of something, include everything below the certainty of demonstration. An example of this is that the sun will rise tomorrow. This is a matter of fact learned from experience. Matters of fact are not certain. That is, it is always possible to conceive of the contrary of every matter of every fact, and it never implies a contradiction if you deny them. That the sun will rise tomorrow is a matter of fact statement learned from experience. It makes perfectly good sense to say that the sun will not rise tomorrow because it is possible to conceive of this state of affairs. The point is that statements of mathematics are certain and independent of experience because they are definitions. For example, it is impossible to conceive or imagine a round square because of the definitions we have assigned to round and square. The definitions which we have assigned to sun and rising make it quite possible to conceive of the sun not rising. Hume is mostly interested in matter-of-fact statements because they provide us with virtually all of our knowledge of the world. Matters of fact themselves are based on the relation of cause and effect, which in turn are based on experience. Hume turns to explain this relation of cause and effect, proceeding with the copy principle to find out from what impression the idea is derived. Supposing that the idea of causation must be derived from some relation between objects, Hume discovers that objects that stand in the relation of cause and effect are contiguous. Contiguity is thus deemed essential to causation. The second component to cause and effects is priority in time. The cause must be temporally prior to the effect. Another essential relation to causation is constant conjunction. Through experience, we learn that certain events have always been attended with certain effects, that heat has always attended flame, for example, and we call one cause and the other effect. The most important element to causation is that of necessary connection. In fact, the inquiry, Hume challenges one to define a cause without comprehending, as a part of the definition, a necessary connection with its effect. In sum, this means that A causes B. If A occurs, then B must occur. B absolutely must follow on the occurrence of A. For A to be the cause of B, then not only must A and B be spatio-temporally contiguous, and not only must A precede A, but A and B must also be necessarily connected. Before we can discuss what constitutes a necessary connection or how it is to be defined, Hume says that he must answer two other questions. One, for what reason we pronounce it necessary that everything whose existence has a beginning should also have a cause. Why we conclude that such a particular cause must necessarily have such particular effects, and what is the nature of that inference we draw from the one to the other and of the belief we suppose in it. Each question is taken in turn. Why is causes always necessary? It is generally thought that the maxim in philosophy that whatever begins to exist must have a cause of existence is intuitively and demonstrably certain. This is thought to be so by Hobbes and Locke, amongst others. Hume denies that this maxim is intuitively or demonstrably certain. First, the maxim is not an example of the constant relations. In other words, the maxim does not turn on of any of the four relations: resemblance, quantity or number, degree of quality, and contrariety. His main argument has to do with the imagination's ability to separate ideas wherever it can perceive a difference between them. That is the separability principle, coupled with the maxim borrowed from Descartes that nothing we imagine is absolutely impossible. From these two principles, Hume draws the consequence that the cause and the beginning of existence are not the same thing. This is because we can imagine one without imagining the other. If so, then these two principles require us to hold that a beginning existence without a cause is not possible. In sum, 1. All distinct ideas are separable. 2. The ideas of cause and effect are separable. The idea of cause and of existence is distinct from the idea of a beginning of existence. We can conceive of something beginning without a cause. Since it is possible for the mind to conceive of an object to be non-existent one moment and existent the next, it is possible to conceive of something existing without a cause. If the maxim that whatever begins to exist must have a cause of existence were intuitively or demonstrably true, then we could not have the conception. This follows from the fact that to be intuitive or demonstrative means that the opposite cannot be conceived. We could conceive the opposite, therefore. The maxim is neither intuitive nor demonstrative. Since the principle is not demonstrative, it follows that any purported rational justification of the principle that every beginning of existence has a cause will be fallacious. Hume briefly considers Hobbes, Clarke, and Locke's efforts to demonstrate the necessity of a cause for any given effect. Hobbes claims that unless there was a cause, nothing could begin to exist. Everything would remain in eternal suspense. Hume argues that this assumes that it is what is to be proven, namely that everything has a cause for its existence. Hobbes' argument begs the question. Clarke argues that if anything lacked a cause, it would produce itself and therefore must have existed before itself. This is impossible, so everything must have a cause for its existence. Hume thinks this also begs the question. Clarke assumes what he is trying to prove. Hume also argues that there is a difference between not having a cause and being one's own cause. Locke's demonstration also begs the question. Locke argued that if something is produced by no cause, then it must be produced by nothing. Nothing can never be a cause. Therefore, everything has a cause of its existence. Like the other arguments, this is based on the assumption that everything must have a cause. This is the assumption, is what Hume is challenging. We cannot prove something by assuming it, for if we did, we would prove anything we wanted to. It is worth emphasizing that while Hume denies that the maxim is intuitively or demonstrably certain, he certainly does not question the truth of the maxim. He accepts the causal principle, for instance, in the discussion of liberty and necessity in the inquiry, stating that, quote, it is universally allowed that nothing exists without a cause of its existence. And he goes on to argue that it is compatible with liberty. Further evidence is the 1754 letter to John Stuart, in which he declares, quote, I never asserted so absurd a proposition as that anything might arise without a cause. I only maintain that our certainty of the falsehood of that proposition proceeded neither from intuition nor demonstration, but from another source. The source is experience. Exactly how does experience give rise to such a principle? He thinks this question into another question. Why we conclude that such a particular cause must necessarily have such particular effects, and why we form an inference from one to another. So I am amazed by that explanation. I mean, I've been wrestling with Hume for the past year or two, and this is a phenomenal description of how we get from, relations of ideas, contradiction, even talking about Descartes and why a cause is always necessary. And it's brilliant that Angela goes through all of these philosophical relations, which, from my experience, the secondary literature doesn't do. Maybe I'm the problem. The first class, including resemblance, contiguity, degree, and quality, and quantity or number, depend upon the consideration of related ideas alone and comprise objects of knowledge and certainty. The second class, which includes identity, relations of time and place, and causation, depends on the input of further experience, and these are objects of probability. I mean, brilliantly explained. So let's now move on to something else. And again, I don't think we're going to read all of this, but we will read a good part of it. And it is the Stanford Encyclopedia to Causation. And we're looking at the regulatory theory of causation. So let me just pull this up now, one moment. Yeah, it's actually reasonably big. So we'll have a look over some of it and we'll read it in full some other day. So let me just stop sharing my screen and I'll share this one. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So this is the regulatory theories of causation, and it is in the Stanford Encyclopedia, regularity and inferential theories of causation, in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and it is written by Holger Andreas Mario Gunther. The core idea of regularity theories of causation is that causes are regularly followed by their effects. A genuine cause and its effect stand in a pattern of invariable succession. Whenever the cause occurs, so does its effect. This regular association is to be understood by contrast to relations of causal power efficacy. On a regularity theory, a cause and its effect only instantiate a regularity. No causal powers are posited in virtue of which a cause brings about its effect. Moreover, no metaphysical entities or connection are posited which would ground the regularities in the world. Causation is not conceived of as a metaphysically thick relation of production, but rather a simple instantiation of regularity. The most influential regularity theory, is due to Hume. He defines a cause to be, quote, an object precedent and contiguous to another, and where all the objects resembling the former are placed in like relation of priority and contiguity to those objects that resemble the latter. This definition contains three conditions for a cause. First, a cause temporally precedes its effect. Second, a cause is contiguous to its effect. That is, a cause is in spatio-temporal vicinity to its effect. Third, all objects similar to the cause are in like relation to objects similar to the effect. This third resemblance condition says that cause and effect instantiate a regularity. To see this, note the presupposition of the resemblance condition. Cause and effects can be sorted into types. The objects which are like the cause are of a certain type, and so are objects which are like the effect. The third condition thus says that all objects of a certain type are followed by an effect of a certain type. A Humean regularity theory, which may or may not coincide with Hume's genuine analysis of causation, can be summarized as follows. Where C and E denote token events of types C and E respectively. C is a cause of E if and only if C is spatio-temporally contiguous to E, C precedes E in time, and all events of type C are followed by an event of type E. Causation is thus analyzed in terms of spatio-temporal contiguity, temporal precedence, and regular connection. The causal relation is reduced to non-causal entities. The two particular facts about spatio-temporal contiguity and temporal precedence and the general regularity. There is nothing more to causation according to HRT. In particular, causation does not involve a necessary connection or productive relation, causal powers or the like, not even to ground the regularities. This stance against metaphysically thick connections of causation is characteristic of the regularity theory. Let us explain some of the corollaries to H or T. The spatio-temporal contiguity of cause and effect excludes causation at a distance. A cause is proximate to its effect entirely either or via a chain of contiguous events. The temporal precedence of the cause and the direction of time imply that causation is asymmetric. If C causes E, then it is not the case that E causes C. Temporal precedence thus explains the symmetry of causation and how we can distinguish between causes and effects. However, it also rules out the possibility of simultaneous and backwards in time causation, and it dampens the prospect of non-circular theory of time defined in terms of causation. Condition 3 relates a particular instance of causation. C is a cause of E to the class of all like cases, the types of C and E. Hume takes causation to be primarily a relation between particular matters of fact, yet the causal relation between these actual particulars holds in virtue of a certain regularity. Any causal relation thus supervenes on a regularity in a sense that there can be no change in the causal relation without change in regularity. Any regularity, in turn, supervenes on particular matters of fact. There can be no change in the regularity without a change in particular matters of fact. Whether regularity is true is thus determined by which particular matters of fact obtain. Likewise, whether a causal relation obtains is determined by which regularity obtains. In the end, only the particular matters of fact determine whether or not a causal relation obtains, since the relation of supervenance is transitive. According to condition 3, a cause is a sufficient condition for its effect, in the sense all C-like events occurring in the actual world are in fact followed by an E, where the actual world is understood as a collection of all particular spatio-temporal matters of fact. The sufficiency of the cause for the effect is not to be understood in a modal, stronger sense. In particular, Hume denies that the cause necessitates the effect. In the world, there is, to use Hume's phrase, just a constant conjunction between cause and effects. On HRT, every effect has a sufficient cause. This does not imply that any event has a sufficient cause, but it says that if there is a causal relation, it is deterministic. Probabilistic causation is thus not coverted by HRT. And while the theory is compatible with a probabilistic analogy of causation, we follow Hume in restricting ourselves to deterministic causation in this entry. See the probabilistic idea of causation. HRT allows us to discover causal relations. We may observe spatio-temporal contiguity, temporal precedence, and that a certain type of event is generally followed by another type of event. Upon repeated observation of an invariable pattern of succession, we begin to expect that this particular type of event of a certain type is followed by that particular event of a certain type. We develop an inferential habit due to the experienced constant conjunction of type, or as Hume puts it, a cause is an object precedent and contiguous to another, and so united with it, that the idea of the one determines the mind to form the idea of the other. Our mind forms a habit to expect or to infer the effect from a cause upon repeated experiencing events which occur in sequence. Thereby we produce a connection between objects or events that go beyond what is immediately present to the senses. Our senses and our memory provide us only with finitely many instances of objects or events which occur jointly, and from which our minds form inferential habits. Still, these inferential habits apply also to the future, as of yet unobserved instances of the regularity. In Hume's words, after the discovery of the constant conjunction of any objects, we always draw an inference from one object to another. Perhaps it will appear in the end that the necessary connection depends on the inference, instead of the inference depending on the necessary connection. And indeed, Hume says that necessity is something that exists in the minds, not in the objects. So there is no necessary connection in the world, which would go beyond regular association. However, the inferential habits we develop based on the perceived regularities make us feel that the connection between cause and effect is stronger than mere invariable succession. Then necessary connection exists in our minds, but not in the world. See an entry on Hume on necessary connection, constructive phase. So this is something that we will definitely be reading. Let's just have a quick look at it. Brilliant. Wow. I didn't see this one. Okay, according to the standard interpretation, do we have much left? Yeah, we won't be reading all of this today. I'm going to finish it up now. According to the standard interpretation, the regularities themselves are real. These really are jointly and repeated occurring events of certain types that are spatially contiguous, and some temporally precede others. And the regularities are mind-dependent. Even if there were no minds around, the regularities would exist as patterns in the Humean mosaic of particular facts. Is causation in the world, as expressed by HRT, extensionally equivalent to causation in the mind? The difference between the two definitions seems to be the condition 3 of HRT is placed by the following condition. C of type C makes us infer E of type E. While HRT does not require the presence of an epistemic agent, the other definitions seem to require such an agent, and is thus mind-dependent. And an epistemic agent may infer an event from another event, even though there is no regularity connecting the two events. Having said that the two definitions are not extensionally equivalent, the definitions can be read in ways which make them coextensive. The epistemic agent of the second definition, for example, can be seen as a hypothetical, omniscient observer who always and only infers in accordance with all and only true regularities. What is Hume's view on causation? We will not enter this exegetical debate here. Suffice it to say that the interpretation of Hume are manifold. Silos says that H or T was Hume's view to give or take a bit and argues for it. But there are many deviating interpretations, such as Beebe, Garrett, Strawson, and Wright. The relation between causation in the world and causation in the mind in particular has remained a matter of debate among Hume scholars. So we're going to leave that there today, but we will be reading the Stanford Encyclopedia next time and going over this next time again. But I think there's been massive progress made today from reading these entries on Hume, and then we'll also read Hume himself. Take care.